Bore good morning. Welcome to those who are joining us through the internet or now or later. We've just come to the end of our morning prayer. And so some of us quite attuned to the silence already. But during morning prayer today we read the set readings from Amos chapter 6 in the Hebrew Bible and from 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 1 to 11, Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. And both Amos and Paul were really admonishing the people of God. Amos shaking the people for their complacency, telling them to go and look at the Gentiles and all that was wrong and all that was not of God, and see that they themselves were living in a way that was no more of God, as they lived in complacency, conceited in their own comfort, making up nice songs about God, sitting comfortably and talking about God, while abusing the land, abusing each other, abusing the foreigner, wasting creation. And similarly, Paul talks of infighting amongst Christians, amongst followers of the way. He has been talking about personality cults, people looking for different leaders and preferring one over another, and really not practicing their faith, not knowing God, not knowing Christ, forgetting what they've been taught, how to pray, how to be, how to live, how to share and love, but instead taking each other to court. To seek recompense, righteous judgment. Paul says, is there no one wise enough to sort these things out for you, among you? You are followers of the way, you are Christ's people. You are to put on the mind of Christ, you are to be Christ. And yet you look for professionals who do not know Christ to manage your affairs. Who do not know Christ. Today is the day that the church celebrates the confession of Peter, you are the Messiah. Remember Jesus asking his disciples, who do people say I am? And some say prophets. Elijah come back from the dead. And so on. And Jesus asks, well, who do you say I am? And it is Peter who says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, of course, you are a rock. Simon, you are Cephas, the rock. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Now, of course, this moment passes quickly as Peter goes on to rebuke Jesus for the next teaching, where Jesus says, well, I'm going to be handed over. I'm going to be killed. This isn't going to end comfortably. Your confession, your knowing of me, doesn't mean your life is all sorted out now and everyone's going to treat you well. And you can sit back and write lovely songs and sit in the warmest church and have the best Welsh cakes. Peter rebukes him for that. No, you're the Messiah. It can't be. The Messiah is glorious. The Messiah is going to free me and the people of God. And we're going to be the masters of this world and administer justice. How can you be handed over to the authorities and killed? And what does that mean for us? And of course Jesus says, this is worldly thinking, Satan thinking, get behind me. Get out of the way, Peter. Just moments after, you are the rock. On this rock the church will be built. The gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Get behind me, Satan. There is another account that has survived or been brought into light of a confession of faith in Jesus by one of his disciples. It's found in the Gospel of Thomas. And it's Thomas who gives this confession. It's saying 13. Joshua said to his disciples, what am I like for you? To what would you compare me? Simon Peter said, you are like a righteous angel. Matthew said, you're like a wise philosopher. And Thomas said, Master, my mouth could never utter what you are like. Master, my mouth could never utter what you are like. Joshua told him, I am no longer your master, because you have drunk and have become drunken from the same bubbling source from which I spring. Then he took him aside and said 3 words to him. When Thomas returned to his companions, they questioned him, what did Joshua tell you? Thomas answered, if I told you even one of the things he said to me, you would pick up stones and throw them at me, and fire would come out those stones and consume you. Thomas confesses, there are no words to say who you are. I am no longer your master. You have drunk from the same spring from which I emanate, from which I come. Remember Jesus next to the well with the Samaritan woman. If you had asked me, I would have given you living water. Living water that bubbles within you. The Gospel of Thomas was written before Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. It just records sayings of Jesus. No narrative. Perhaps some of the sayings have been drawn on by the canonical Gospels. And then much edited over time, over hundreds of years. And while churches have crystallized doctrines and put them into creeds and formulae, many of the words of Jesus' teachings have been pushed underground, literally. They needed to be buried because those that were found with these teachings were persecuted once the church became authoritarian and centralized. But what is hidden will come to light. Jesus' teaching does survive in the Gospels. And in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, Jesus is seen to teach us to pray. Where he tells us, pray to the Father in secret, pray to Abba, Mother, Father, God, the one that is, I am, in secret. Don't make a big fuss about it. Don't show it off, ponce it around. Go into your inner room. Close the door. And pray to your mother, your father, Abba, in secret. And God, who hears you and sees you praying in secret, will reward you, will work the transformation in you. Will show you the Christ in you. We are called to share our faith, to give witness to the Christ. We are not called to brainwash people into believing what we tell them to believe. This is the antithesis of Christ's calling. We are called to witness and to share. That those with whom we share may know the Christ in them. If there's anything intellectual to know, it's simply that Christ is in them. Beyond that, the intellect is pretty much redundant. It just gets in the way. But to make this sharing, we have to know God, we have to know Christ, and we have to know that it is Christ in us that does the sharing. Even that is too intellectual. What we need to do is practice, to be still, to enter the cave, as our liturgy this morning pointed to. In fact, I think right now I'm going to share that liturgy again, so that those who are joining us later might share in it. So I'm going to share this on the screen once more. In morning prayer we say this together, and so welcome to speak this out or just listen. To truly pray is to let light into our secret self, the one we are ashamed of, the one we try to hide from ourselves and say is not me. Entering silence is like walking into a dark cave, seeing nothing, hearing nothing. We do not know what we will find there. Maybe we will find the bones of things long dead. Maybe we will find the living wings of a bat, or the 1,000 feet of some wormish thing. Maybe we will find the silence not at all quiet, but full of unknown rustles. Maybe we will find ourselves and find old hurts or desires that are long dead, and find the 1,000 feet of some urge or temptation that could carry us away in a heartbeat. But it is only in the deepest dark that we can see the tiny light that is always present. That sliver that comes from the unknown place. That sliver of light that gives us hope. That sliver of light that looks a bit like grace. It is only in the stillness, in the stillest silence, that we can hear the whisper of mercy. And so we may confess, you are, I am, the Christ, the Son, the daughter of the living God. Or again, There are no words to describe you, to say who you are, draw lines around you. So we must enter the silence as if walking into a cave, not knowing what we will find, but going there in faith. How do we enter the silence? Well, that's really what the school of Christian mysticism is about. How to go into the silence. Very often via words, but only so that we may be broken down, simplified. And in a moment we will practice together in a way that perhaps is one of the most simplified. But just two more pieces of input. One from Thomas Merton and the other from Thomas Keating. Thomas Merton says, when we come face to face with ourselves in the lonely ground of our own being, we confront many questions about the value of our existence, the reality of our commitments, the authenticity of our everyday lives. Remember Amos and Paul. In silence, we face and admit the gap between the depths of our being, which we consistently ignore, and the surface that is true to our own reality. We recognize the need to be at home with ourselves in order that we may go out to meet others, not just with a mask of affability, but with real commitment and authentic love. And Thomas Keating takes this a little further. And he's thinking about Matthew 6:6, go into your inner room. The divine invitation might be stated in this way. If you would like to access the deeper knowledge of God and enter into the process that leads to divine union, then enter your inner room as a first step. The inner room is the symbol of the spiritual level of our being, a level inclined to silence. It is closer to the innermost center of our being, which is the true self. and to the Trinity, the source of our being, at every level, body, soul, and spirit. The inner room is not so much a place as an interior disposition of openness and surrender to God. Close the door. God's first language is silence. As soon as we put the deep knowledge of God into words, we've interpreted it. The mystery that we are accessing is available for us, just as it is, not as we think it is, or as we want it to be. And so drawing on the practice of the desert mothers and fathers, no doubt also of the early Celtic church in these islands, maybe from the practice of Jesus of Nazareth. Thomas Keating taught us centering prayer. A method of praying without words, or praying with just one word. Like a mantra, but not a mantra. A word to bring us back to stillness as the thoughts of our minds, as the programs in us, our comfortableness and uncomfortableness rises. The thoughts play across the screen of our imaginations. A word to just bring us back to stillness, to help us not to be attached to those thoughts or to any kind of preconception as to how we describe the Christ that we meet, the Christ that transforms us back into Christ. Any of these ideas, in fact. All of it plays across our mind, the screen of our consciousness, as we enter silence. It's natural. It's even after years of practice, it still happens. Maybe less, but it happens. So Thomas Keating suggests we take a word or a short phrase to introduce at the beginning of our practice and to return to as we notice our minds drifting or our attachment to one idea or another. But we come to the silence with one intention. To consent to God's transformation in us. We're not doing anything except walking into the cave. What happens there will be by the grace of God. Sometimes it might be quite pleasant, often painful, agitating, difficult. But neither of those emotions or feelings matter. We let them go. Even flashes of inspiration, insight, we let them go because God is transforming us, revealing the Christ of us in us. So in the time remaining, let us practice. Something that we discussed recently, Joe, Viv and I, was the notion of sharing. And at this point, usually we stop for sharing. But today, I'll just ask you to practice. And we will look for ways of sharing. It may be Joe or Viv or I will want to do sharing in our sessions. We haven't talked it right through yet. But it is very short. By the time we've said something, it's difficult to really practice. Though hopefully there is some meditation in the way that we present. Today, let's just practice. So we'll practice centering prayer. You may have done this many times. You may not have done it before. Either way, let's practice. So let's just begin by coming back to the breath and noticing the breath. Don't need to change anything with it. It'll slow and deepen naturally as you focus. Just notice the in-breath and the out-breath. The body rising and falling naturally. Enjoying the breath. Like this, we become present. So during the practice, just come back to the breath, or come back to the word or phrase that you either choose now or you notice. Thomas Keating suggests words like Yeshua, love, peace, Christ. But really the word itself doesn't matter. whatever works for you. Whatever rises now. But if you choose a word, then stay with that word. Don't think about its meaning. Just stay with that word. Because any change will be distracting once you begin. So as the thoughts pass across your mind and you notice that you are thinking, return to the word or to the breath. Or even just say to yourself, thinking, thinking. But let it go. Return to stillness. One thought before we begin, once again. I consent to God's transformation in me. And so gently, either we focus on the breath, or we introduce the word or short phrase. 20 minutes.